Kevin Herter, the big Hurt, Kayvon, Red Velvet, the names. Does he have another one? Red, no.
The big Hurt, Red Velvet. Who's Roger Rabbit's wife?
Jessica Rabbit.
Jessica Rabbit. That's what I'll call him.
Just because he's redhead.
He's a redhead. Smoking on a redhead.
Kevin Herter, he has not looked good in preseason. This is like, we overreacting, or is it, cause for concern? Because he ended last year very poorly. As we all know, his postseason was horrendous. I mean, you argue one of the reasons we lost that series to the Warriors was, Kevin Herter shooting 20% from three and probably not much better from the field. And he doesn't seem to really have improved. I mean, it's only preseason so far, but shooting in the 20% in 3-point shooting this preseason, I think barely over 30% on just field goals in general. His defense looks, he did a little better against the Warriors that one game, but man, he just doesn't look good, really. I mean, is that cause for concern? How much should we be panicking right now over Kevin Herter, and how much should he be like worried about his starting job?
Well, I would say in terms of panicking, I think the Kings' depth this season makes it that you don't have to panic too much, because it's not like there's a hole that can't be filled. It's not like a Rashawn Holmes situation where it's just like, oh shoot, well, who else at this point? Even though, that's not really a great comparison because Alex Len was there the whole time. But yeah, the Duarte acquisition and Colby Jones is surprising, if you want to call it just comfort in the league, it seems. That makes it less of a cause for concern, I think. But I mean, fourth highest paid player on the team, the big acquisition looked like a steal from Atlanta. It doesn't really carry that same magic to it because, like you said, not only is he struggling defensively, and I mean, his intent is there defensively, but then he's not complementing that with any offense at all. And that's kind of rough. I think, Mike Brown said after Thursday's game against the Jazz that when you're bringing a different level of intensity and physicality to the defensive end, and you're doing that more often, it changes your rhythm and it changes the shots that you usually make. They make it a little harder. So maybe it's an adjustment period, but I don't know. I mean, it hasn't looked super convincing on offense, and he's played a lot less with Domas. I mean, when he came off the bench in that game where Duarte started, and, in this past game without Domas playing, you've seen him a lot without Domas, and it's just like he tries to get into the middle and get a little floater or a little mid-range up, and he's missing those, and it just doesn't seem like he has a rhythm at all right now. And I mean, he's going to have his chance to start. He's going to start, the first 5-10 games, I would imagine, before a decision has to get made. But I mean, he kind of has to whip it into shape quickly because, like I said, there are guys in the wings that could easily fill in for him. I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say that he's in danger of losing a spot in the rotation, but if there's no improvement, there are guys that play both ends of the floor better than him. And especially if he's not shooting, if he never finds that rhythm offensively, that's a huge issue. I guess, again, maybe don't panic, but I think he's definitely in danger of losing a starting spot. And I would venture so far as to say that I wouldn't be surprised if he falls out of the rotation here and there. It's going to be rough for him if he can't balance things out.
Yeah, it's crazy how much difference a year makes. I mean, maybe not a year ago, maybe 11 months ago. Remember how hot he started off the season?
Yeah.
He was shooting like 50%, averaging, I don't know, probably like 17, 18 points a game. Just absolutely on fire. And everyone's like, wow, like Atlanta messed up getting rid of this guy, this and that. And man, I mean, I know Kevin has it in him to be that player again. It just, I don't know. He's going to have to turn it around quick because, I mean, you can't just – I think he'll have the job to start off the season for sure. But, I mean, there's only so much of a leash that – like how long that leash is going to be, right, until, Duarte is performing well. And like you said, Colby Jones has looked really good. There's a lot of people around him that can fill in. And if he can't step up, I mean, like you said, I think I can see him losing that starting job and maybe even get out of the rotation for a minute until he can do it. I mean, I think Kevin Herter will end the season as the starting shooting guard, but I don't know. I think he will lose it at some point early on.
Yeah.
Just because that defense and the lack of offense, I mean, the Kings don't have time to wait around, and they have
Right.
two guys ready to take that starting job. So,
Yeah, it's one of those things too where we talked about it a little bit last week where it's like, okay, well, if Herter doesn't start, things get even more troublesome for him because him coming off the bench, I feel like as opposed to Duarte coming off the bench, you're weakening, a defensive weapon off the bench because he's never, I don't think he's ever going to be like a scary defender or really good. I mean, he can be solid. He needs to find that baseline of defense with it where he's not getting blown by and where he's playing physically while not sacrificing his offense. But like you put him off the bench, he's the backup three. You probably have to have him guard wings more. That doesn't make things easier. That makes that like amplifies his issues. He's not the strongest guy on top of not having the greatest athleticism. I mean, he needs to I think for him to preserve his status, he needs to preserve his starting spot because that's where he's going to be able to perform best. He's going to play with Domas more. Like we said, that's just one of those things that just opens things up for him. And I mean, but that doesn't necessarily keep him in the starting lineup because anybody can have a good 2-man game with Domas, especially a guy like Duarte who's had experience with him. So it's just like I said, 5, 10, 15 games, something like that. He's going to have to show massive strides. And I think based on Brown's comments, he knows there's going to be a bit of an adjustment that needs to take place. But like you said, this season's going to be tough. The division is tougher. The conference is tougher. Teams are there's no way it's going to be as weird and as down of a season or an up and down season for the league. Because last season was super weird. The fact that a 48-win team finished third in the conference, it's pretty peculiar and odd. So stakes are high, and like you said, deeper roster means a shorter leash for Huerter. And yeah, I don't know how things are going to go, but I can't help but feel a little pessimistic about it, just because if there's an adjustment period, I think it might take longer than the leash would allow, and then from there, that just creates more issues. I don't know. I don't know if he'll get traded. I mean, that I'm thinking real far down the line now. But, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that conversation starts coming up in late December, January for venturing on the trade deadline. If, Duarte is starting and most importantly, staying healthy. And if Colby Jones keeps playing the way he's shown that he can play, both in the summer league and in the preseason. But Kevin Huerter, I think he's on the rocks, All of a sudden, Atlanta can go, see, we knew it.
Yeah, exactly. We won the trade.
I mean, technically speaking, that was the point that Atlanta wanted to do by getting DeJounte Murray, was to improve their defense. And there's no question that Kevin Huerter's defense was never going to be the biggest draw to him. Of course, there is always a potential that he can kind of, again, find that baseline of defense and be kind of a low tier 2-way player, but still a 2-way player nonetheless. But I mean, I would have expected pretty palpable improvement by this point, and he's just struggling. And it just seems like I said, he's just completely out of rhythm at this point. So he's going to need to figure that out, because this team's trying to go from good to great, as they always say. And they can't sit here and wait around for any guy, regardless of how much he's being paid, how much he's a fan favorite. And he is. People love him. People wear the red wigs and whatnot. But this is go time. This is serious, trying to vie for championship contention. And Huerter, quite frankly, right now, doesn't look like he can help immensely, or at least help as much as some of the other guys on the team. So he's got to figure it out pretty quickly.
Yeah, you're hoping he could show it in the preseason, and just only brought up more questions. So I don't know. We'll see how long Brown's leash is for him.
And to be fair to him, I mean, his intent and his response to the challenge is going to be good. I don't think he's going to give up or say, screw this situation, screw this team. I think the bond of the locker room is too strong. He was such an immense help for the regular season last year. So I don't know. He's not going to roll over on this one. It'll be really interesting to see how he bounces back. But I think, beyond just getting challenged on this and beyond all these issues being so glaring and arguably being one of the biggest topics and takeaways from the preseason, maybe losing the starting job for a segment of the season is going to be good for him. Maybe that's a real wake up call. Maybe you don't really feel it until it's actually slapped you in the face. So we'll see. I don't anticipate it just being all downhill from here for Kevin Huerter, but like I said, he's got to figure something out because, we post things about, well, should Duarte start over Huerter? And I feel like we get pretty good engagement on that of people just being like, no, Huerter gets blown by too much, just echoing the things that we're all seeing. And it's just like, it's hard to deny. It's very hard to deny.